You're listening to the Deathlocker podcast. Today we're going to be doing a retrospective kind of review-ish thingy-majiggy bobber for Creepshow. I'm Hobo Socks.
Mark Bone.
Steve-O.
Frank the Tank.
Frank the Tank. So we're going to be talking about Creepshow, Creepshow 1, Creepshow 2, and Creepshow 3. We will not be talking about the unofficial Creepshow 3, which is Tales from the Dark Side. Not going to touch the TV series as yet. We're just going to kind of keep it short, try to keep it fun, because apparently Mark Bone and Steve-O, who's also the hackerman from the wrestling podcast, The Three Faces of Wrestling, who's apparently hiding and not in the screen at all. Keep going.
We're trying to social distance.
Yeah.
He's trying to do social distancing. So let's just go ahead and get this started. The first Creepshow movie, the classic, the one that started all, two masters of horror, Stephen King, George Romero. What are your guys' thoughts?
Kick us off, Frank.
I love it. I know Shane was as well, huge Stephen King fan like me. So this was like a no-brainer when this came out. And I remember seeing it in the movies. I think it was done very well. Romero had a track record of doing movies well like this, and Stephen King's cameo in the movie was great, and there was a lot of things to like about this film. It was done very well, as close to the book as possible. So,
And it has a bow in it. That's always a good thing.
One of the things I think is kind of interesting today is actually May 16th?
Yeah.
Yes.
Creepshow was released on May 16th, 1982.
Wow.
So we're actually doing this episode on an anniversary. I can't do basic math, so I can't tell you what anniversary it is. Maybe Steve can pull off his shoes, count his toes, and sometime during the podcast let us know what year that is.
38.
38. I think one of the things that Frank hit is, huge Stephen King fan, and around this time frame is right where you start seeing a lot of Stephen King adaptations coming in. A lot of stuff was coming around. He hadn't quite gotten to, I think it was about the mid 90s, early 90s, where the Stephen King kind of crap rotation kind of kicked in. This is where you really started to see him building up the reputation for master horror, and people were really buying into, this is Stephen King, this is exciting, let's go ahead and let's get on it. His name carried a lot more than George Romero's name, because honestly, George Romero is a great filmmaker, but for most of the population, people only know him for anything of the dead. They don't know Crazies, Martin,
Night Riders.
Yeah, Night Riders, Dark Calf, which was a Stephen King one. They just know him for the Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Night of the Living Deads. So George Romero, to nerd guys, he was a name, but to the mass population, Stephen King was the draw. The movie actually looks like it made budget was only $8 million. It only made $21 million. So back in the early 80s, that's not bad numbers.
Right.
Enough to get it a sequel. But for an anthology, I don't think there were many. One, horror wasn't, it was big, but it wasn't like oversaturated yet. And I don't think there were really any anthology horror movies out there around that time, were there?
This was probably one of the first ones, going off like those EC comic style with the little segues in between and the art and all that stuff. So this was definitely, I thought, groundbreaking for a movie of that type. And there was a lot more after that, which is, the Twilight Zone movie and Tales from the Dark Side. There's also a couple of Tales from the Crypt movies, which are all that kind of basic style of a movie.
Tales from Terror, a lot of the kind of anthology stuff started popping up. It had a nice, tight little fun prologue and epilogue. The kid going through the comics to get the little, the doll?
Yes, the voodoo doll.
Which I thought was pretty awesome.
I have one of those.
Do you?
Yeah.
Did it work?
Let's try.
Try it on Ackerman.
So while Frank the Tank's looking for his voodoo doll.
Oh, it's quick. So here's the ad. Here's the ad
Okay.
from the comic that you could send away for. And as you can see, as in the movie, the ad was ripped out already. So someone had sent out when he opened the book. And there we are.
Nice.
There's like not a lot of licensed things from Creepshow now with the reaction figures. They have a couple of those. I think Monstars is doing them. But other than that, there's not really a lot of anything from NECA or McFarlane from Creepshow. So there's not a lot of stuff out there for people to buy.
Yeah, I think Trick or Treat Studios had a Fluffy mask, and there's like if you look on your Etsy's and eBay's, there's a lot of fan made stuff that's kind of
that's the kind of stuff that I keep picking up.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. One of the things I liked out of all the franchises, the first Creepshow the best is, I'm looking at the list right now, there was what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There was 5 stories in it.
Mm-hmm.
And they went, in my opinion, they went at a pretty brisk pace. Father's Day, The Lonesome Death of Jordy, I always mess up his name, Verrill, which Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, his bad acting went well for that character. I think
it was bad acting at all.
You think that was a Oscar-worthy performance by Stephen King?
I mean, he has cameos in a lot of his films.
That wasn't a cameo. That was a starring role.
But I'm saying for something that is a little more acting, that was not. I thought it was pretty good.
So you heard it here first. Frank the Tank thinks that the 1982 Oscar should have went to Stephen King for his portrayal of Jordy in The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill.
Hey, Frank, I got a question for you, man. It's kind of Stephen King related, and I've always wondered, and if anybody knows, it's going to be you. I see.
I'm sorry. What is your cohort doing? He keeps
I don't know. I'm really
zooming in and out.
I'm trying to ignore him.
You're a creep.
Pretty creepy.
Mark Bone has his own creeper at his house right now.
What is there in several of the movies, kind of in the background or on the TV and the Stephen King adaptations, you might find like wrestling on the television. It seemed like there was a theme in like 2 or 3 movies. Was there anything about that, or just happened to, Stephen King a big wrestling fan? Or
they have the I don't know, because they have the comic book which was written, I think, after the movie. Some of the stories that were in it were obviously written already, but they didn't appear in any books anywhere. So I don't know if that's something that Stephen King had in his books, or it was just something that was added in when they did the film. So that I don't have an answer for that. But I think I have a copy of the Raft from the second movie. I have a copy of the Crate. Some of them I don't have in any books, and they might have been printed in like magazines. They weren't in any of his books, so I don't have all of them. So I couldn't answer that one for you, unfortunately. But there are some things that were in the movie, like music that's playing on a jukebox. I think it's the music that plays on the jukebox in They're Creeping Up on You is also played in the end title of Evil Dead or something like that, if I can remember correctly. There's a lot of things that intermingle between that story and other stories, and in between the stories themselves.
What's your favorite story in Creepshow, the original?
Oh man,
That's a hard one. Well,
yeah, I don't know. It's like picking one of my favorite children. I love the movie. There's no bad scene in that original. My favorite? I don't know. I couldn't pick a favorite. I like all of them.
Well, let's let Frank the Tank think about that for a while. Let's give Steve Hackerman over there, the floating head behind Mark Bone, a chance. First Creepshow, what was your favorite story?
Ooh, that is a tough one. I'm gonna have to go with the Crate.
Why?
Because of the thing in the crate.
I like the Crate. Why? Because there was a fucking crate. And there was something in the crate, so we went with the Crate.
Came out like HBO just came out, and they only had 5 movies to play, and that was one of them. So yeah, like 2 or 3 times a day. It was different for the time frame. I love that movie. It was amazing. Every one of them was good. Every little episode in that first one was good. It was that's actually one of my favorite movies. I mean, it ain't exactly the biggest slasher horror film there is.
It wasn't supposed to be.
But yeah, it was good. I love that movie.
So Frank, not to put you on the spot of which one's your favorite, how about let's go from this standpoint. Which story lasted with you the longest? Which one had the most impact?
Father's Day.
Father's Day?
Yeah, just the opening scene and him coming from the graveyard. I thought that was, as a little kid, that you love that stuff. I mean, and we always got a kick out of the creeping up on you, because we always like the roaches at the end and watch them come out of his face and his body, and that was kind of cool. The other stories were just stories that I liked, but they didn't really like resonate with me as much as the two bookends. So the Father's Day opening and the creeping up on you closing.
Yeah, I think the Father's Day is the one that's the most associated with the first Creepshow.
Yeah.
And I think the visual, when you see the T-shirts and the a lot of the poster art, the different DVD covers and stuff, it seems like Father's Day.
And I would say the crate probably is the second. Yeah, would be the second biggest.
The visual of holding the head with the candles on it.
Yeah.
And then I think the character the most stands out is Fluffy from the crate. People just kind of remember the eyes and what about you, Mark? Any one of those really stand out for you?
Actually, they're creeping up on you. Was probably like my least favorite of all of them. Growing up, there was a lot of phobias that were shared in my house, and one of them was cockroaches. Like, I cannot handle roaches, and so that one, it had more of like a stomach churning effect on me, just the thought of roaches. So but Father's Day is obviously the that lead story again, all the imagery. Where's my cake? We say it even on Father's Day around here. I may do something similar and like start banging my hands on the table.
That's what the kid. Where's my cake? I think the one that really stood out the most for me, all those are, all of them are solid. A lot of times when you get the anthology series, there's a really strong one, a really weak one. Even one that might be considered to be the weakest is still above and beyond a lot of the other stuff that you've seen out there in anthologies, in my opinion. The Something That Tied You Over, I had never seen Leslie Nielsen do really anything dramatic. The only Leslie Nielsen I knew was, your Police Squad, your Naked Gun.
Right, yeah.
And that kind of messed me up a little bit, just seeing somebody who I'm so used to and I'm so associated with being like a comedic actor, just take enjoyment and being, and that whole thing.
That whole scene was that way, because Ted Danson, I mean, what did you know him from besides Cheers? And that was also very comedic. I mean, the cast in Creepshow 1 alone was totally different from Creepshow 2, because Creepshow 1 was full of huge stars and cameos. You had Ed Harris and Leslie Nielsen, Adrienne Barbeau, Tom Atkins was in the opening scene with, which I don't know if a lot of people know this, if they're into Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, who's doing a lot of writing. He does comic books. He writes Lock and Key, which was just on Netflix. And he's done some really good horror work. He's a little boy in the opening scene.
Really?
Yeah, Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, plays the young kid in the opening scene.
Was his acting prowess strong enough that you think he should have rivaled his father for the 1982 Oscar for Best Supporting Actor?
He was a little kid. He got slapped around. He went through his dad's drawers. He found his porn magazines, and then he stuck some needles in his dad's voodoo doll.
Just everything you'd expect from Stephen King's kid.
But there was other people. Hal Holbrook and Fritz Weaver, and I'm trying to think who else was. Tom Savini worked on this movie, did a lot of the makeup for it, which coming off Friday the 13th, that was pretty big. It's like an all-star cast, and George Romero directing and Stephen King writing. Really, how could this movie fail?
So do you consider this, before we kind of say, I want to keep this a little streamlined before we move on to Creepshow 2, would you guys consider this to be a classic horror movie? Like a must-see for anybody who you're trying to get somebody new into horror, you're trying to get your kids into horror. is Creepshow one of those entryway horror movies?
Absolutely. It's not overly violent.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I don't believe there's any nudity. It's a good gateway. I mean, my children have seen both the first two Creepshows, and they're actually more bothered by the second one than the first one. So I think it's perfect. It's not. I don't want to say it's not horror, because it is. To people like us who are really into horror movies, it's kind of tame.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely a horror movie. So I think it's a good gateway movie for people, and especially children.
Especially the children.
Yeah, I think it does have that EC horror vibe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, one of the things in horror that I believe is lost in modern day horror is the implied. And this movie kind of has a lot of the implied. Yeah, you kind of got to see Fluffy, but I mean, throughout the whole thing, you just saw the eyes.
Right.
When dude was buried, it was the implied what's going to happen when the water comes over him. There's a lot of implicitness there, and a lot of great horror. It's filling in the gaps in your mind, because more times than not, that's going to be 10 times worse than what you actually see on the screen.
Right.
I think Creepshow really hits that. It's very, I'm going to say PG-ish. I don't know what the rating was. I'm not looking at it, but by today's standards, it's very PG. There wasn't like an inordinate amount of blood. There wasn't that standard TNA you have with horror.
Nope.
Which, we all know this standard horror, the standard horror formula is about every 7 to 11 minutes. You got to have some TNA, or you got to have a kill.
It was rated R.
It was rated R for its time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, by today's standards, it's really very Goosebumps-ish, I guess, to put it in a layman term. It's I liked it, loved it. The darkness just completely, there he is.
Don't worry about him.
Ackerman, we're going to move on to Creepshow 2, man. What do you think of Creepshow 2?
I'm doing Creepshow 3.
We're just talking, my friend. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
You're doing Creepshow 3. That implies that we have a structure. Deathlocker podcast is not known for being coordinated at all. I am completely unprepared right now.
Hello. Yeah. To me, it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. What did it start off with?
So what were you expecting it to be?
another creep show. Like,
well, I mean, it's another creep show in that it's called Creepshow 2. So
yeah.
What was this another movie that your grandma took you to? First off,
no. It was just like cheaply made. I didn't like it. It was
crazy.
It was cheaply made.
Garbage bags floating in the lake. I don't know, dude. It just. It's. I mean, I remember, what was it? The wooden.
Chief Woodenhead was the first.
Chief Woodenhead, and that sludge in the lake.
The raft. Thanks
for the ride, lady. That one was all right. She kept running over the car. I don't even really remember that. What else there was other stuff that went on in there.
All right, we're gonna take.
So, ladies and gentlemen watching, normally I'd say like and subscribe, but you might not want to like and subscribe on this one because Ackerman's had two. We've actually pushed this back a couple weeks.
You told me to watch the third one, and I did.
And he's had like 3 weeks to watch this movie, and the best we get is the sludge. Creepshow 2.
I got
sludge,
the third.
Not what I was expecting.
I thought you were doing a second one, dude.
What are you talking?
I thought I was doing Creepshow 3. You maybe watch that shit again?
Mark, can you save us?
Yeah, no, he likes it.
We're done talking to you there, Ackerman. Just go back into the darkness. We'll let Mr. Boner Pants pick up the ball here.
When did Creepshow 2 come out?
Creepshow 2 came out May 1st. May 1st, 1987. Had a budget of $3.5 million. That's why I was kind of interested when Ackerman over there, said it looked cheap. It actually had half the budget. Went on to only make $14 million, which if you look at budget to profit margin, it was about the same as the first one. So it was profitable, but $14 million in 1987 isn't the same as 21 million in 1982.
So I love Creepshow, the first one, but again, kind of similar to the Friday the 13th movies. I was 10 years old when Creepshow 2 came out, and I saw it probably when I was 11, and I watched it over and over and over and over again.
Did your grandmother take you to see this one?
No, my grandmother wouldn't be caught dead in these type movies, unlike this guy's right here. But no, I love Creepshow 2. Chief Woodenhead is probably like my favorite one in the whole.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, who knows? We're going to assume that there's somebody actually paying attention to this podcast. Ackerman is having some stomach issues, and he's over there just constantly shitting himself. Sitting right next to Mark Bone. So if Mark Bone suddenly passes out, if you're watching this on the YouTube,
they have dogs.
You can see poor Mark Bone's face melting, tears coming down because Steve Ackerman, Ackerman, is just sitting there pooping himself over and over.
Unbelievable.
And over again.
Now, Creepshow 2, Woodenhead. Yeah, and going back, I mean, I thought that the main guy in Woodenhead was actually an Indian for like years and years and years until I realized that
he's from Mindhunters.
Yeah, he's just the guy on Mindhunter. Like I never paid attention to him. I saw him on Mindhunter, and I was like, that looks like the same guy from Creepshow 2. And I was like, man, sure enough, it is. I don't think they could get away with that nowadays. You know, they would not do that.
It's not politically correct.
No, that's not politically correct. But the only thing about the raft in Creepshow, the first one, you were talking about it being like a great like entry movie. You know, my kids, I have 3 kids. They've watched a bunch of different types of a bunch of horror movies, but Creepshow and like Poltergeist, those things were like kind of my favorite ones to show them. We'd go on road trips, and you know they'd all be in the back, and we would pile in. Creepshow 2, you know, not so much. You know, I have a couple of daughters, and you know, got laying Laverne down on the raft and taking some liberties with Laverne, and I never really felt comfortable, you know, with that scene. You know, with my kids, especially, you know, nowadays. I think it plays a little bit differently, but overall, Creepshow 2 is probably my favorite of the first 2.
The raft is the one that my children are afraid of. That's when I put on Creepshow 2, they won't watch that one. That one bothers them for some reason.
The sludge is going to come up, or is it just the idea that the isolation? You're stuck somewhere in the middle of water. Something comes at you, and
I think it's the way that the thing attacks, the way that would, you know, attach to them and kind of pull them through, and
the skin and all that.
I think there was the scene where the kid was pulled through the raft and his leg broke and went upwards, and it was kind of it was, and it's more realistic. I mean, it's not monster. Well, not that it's not a monster, but it's a thing in the lake that could kind of be, and everything kind of happened. That's something that could really happen, and you'd be on a raft in the middle of the lake. The kids would be freaking out.
Yeah, I mean, I it's commonplace. You know, I have a place up there in Big Bear, California, and there's a lake there, and I'm always afraid that a sludge monster is going to get me because that's how the world works.
You never know.
But okay. But no, I you're not putting a face to a monster. When you're not putting a face to a monster, it's that whole, you know, implicit violence. You know, you just see the sludge come up and start pulling the skin off. And then your brain starts just thinking, how would that feel? You know, and you know, when it's a monster, it's easy to take some sort of disbelief.
Right.
You know, that's not real. You know, it's just there's not a real monster. It's going to come and get me. But it's somewhat feasible. It's easier to trick your mind into thinking that there's a reality to that particular segment. So yeah, I'd 100% agree with you. Same thing with The Hitchhiker. You know.
Yeah.
I know it says based on stories by Stephen King, but I mean, I know The Raft, I forget where The Raft was originally published. I believe it was in a Playboy or a Penthouse or Cavalier.
Yeah, he a lot of stories that he sold to those types of magazines early in his career. So it might be.
I think The Raft was in one of those before. I don't know if it's been put in a collection that's out for purchase right now. I think
Cemetery Dance is doing that now. They're putting out a lot of anthologies and they're publishing original stories that appeared either in a periodical or something that wasn't widely sold. So they're doing a lot of stuff like that. But
the Old Chief Woodenhead and the Hitchhiker. I mean, Hitchhiker is basically, again, that says script by and based on stories by Stephen King, but I really don't consider Chief Woodenhead or the Hitchhiker stories by Stephen King, because the Hitchhiker is a campfire tale that people have been telling since like the 50s. You know, I mean, what was it? Night of the Creeps. That was like the first 5 minutes of it.
Right.
You know, the hook, all that kind of stuff. And then Old Woodenhead, that's what from the Jewish mythology of a golem, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know.
But it's not, I mean, the Simpsons even played on it too. But yeah, that's maybe the structure of, the golem in the store and getting back the trinkets for the Indian heritage. That was Stephen King-ish, but the idea of the golem wasn't created by Stephen King, and the Hitchhiker thing was just appropriated.
And wasn't this the story from the Stephen King story from Tales from the Dark Side? Wasn't that originally supposed to be part of Creepshow or something?
The Cat from Hell?
Yeah.
I believe so. Originally, Creepshow 2 was also supposed to have 5 stories.
Okay.
And if memory serves, it was the Cat from Hell, and I've got the other one up here on my phone. Pinfall was supposed to be the other one, which was a story about a bowling alley.
Didn't you buy comic books of these stories that were left out?
I recall that. Pinfall was, there was a Creepshow 2, and I'd say our listeners can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, but let's be realistic. We don't have any listeners. So if memory serves, there was a Creepshow 2 DVD that was put out, a special edition, and there was a little small comic, and Pinfall was done in comic form.
Okay.
So there was supposed to be the Cat from Hell and Pinfall, so you had 5 stories. So if you look at the original Creepshow, it was, let me click over here in my notes.
Father's Day.
No, the original Creepshow, the running time was 120 minutes.
Okay.
And the running time for Creepshow 2 was 92 minutes. So you have.
Why'd they pull them out?
I'm sorry?
Why'd they pull them out and not do 5?
From what I read, budget. The studio wanted to keep it cheap. You got a $3.5 million budget, so they're probably just trying to keep the budget as cheap. Horror is very rarely profitable.
Yeah.
As a whole. I mean, things either they will make money, but we're not talking about like Jumanji money or Star Wars money or Avengers money.
And then they wind up getting the cult following later, and it becomes a classic out of the theaters. So
the horror movies tend to be profitable, like Kevin Smith or Ice Cube movies are profitable. They're made on micro budgets. You might make 50 or 60 million dollars nowadays, and that's considered to be profitable. Then they want to sell it and make their money off of video on demand and whatever. But they were pulled out, and so we got about a half-hour discrepancy. And if you look at the way that Creepshow 2 goes, it goes prologue, Chief Woodenhead, interlude 1, Raft, interlude 2, Hitchhiker, epilogue.
Right.
So you've got these 2 extra interludes in there just to fill time to, I believe, to get to that 92-minute runtime, which is, traditional movies, they figure about an hour and a half, 90 minutes is a traditional movie. If something goes below 90 minutes, people don't feel like it's really a movie. It's like an hour-long TV show.
I remember going to see Creepshow 2 in the movies, and the theater in my neighborhood wouldn't let us in because it was rated R. So our plan was to buy tickets for another movie and then sneak into Creepshow 2. And I'll never forget to this day, we bought tickets for a movie called My Demon Lover, which was with Nick. The guy who played Nick, he was the boyfriend on Family Ties. He was like the real meathead boyfriend. He was the star of the movie. Anyway, we bought the tickets for that movie, walked in.
Demon Lover.
And they look it up. You can do a podcast on that movie next week.
Why?
And they caught us. They wouldn't let us, so we didn't get to see Creepshow 2 in the theaters that day. So I wound up having to sit through My Demon Lover.
Ackerman, you're back there picking your nose. Mark Bones afraid to turn around, but I'm not joking. He is back there behind you picking his nose.
And he's wiping it on your couch. I hope he's not in your house.
Tell us about your history with My Demon Lover, starring the kid from Family Ties.
We know you saw it.
We know you have the poster. We know you got the tattoo.
Talking to you.
Well, I never saw that. I thought you were talking about my ex.
Scott Valentine was his name. Trying to think who else was in that movie.
I don't think anybody knows his name.
No one, but I saw it in theaters, so it was.
And you paid for a ticket.
And I paid for a ticket, not wanting to see that movie. Let's see. You had Tom Savini was in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Did he play the creep? Right, he played the creep. And then I know someone said this movie was cheaply made and the special effects were terrible, but the special effects were actually done by Berger and Nicotero, who are the hottest thing now, who did The Walking Dead and all that stuff. So I don't know what was bad or cheap about it. It did look like a garbage bag to me. It actually looked like something in the water. I thought it was, I thought it was good.
Let's get back to the Ackerman. Sit up, my friend.
Garden-sized garbage bags, sludge, seaweed, and kelp.
But it worked. It doesn't matter.
Worked.
I mean, it looked.
Yeah, if you saw the movie for the first time last week, then it looks like a garbage bag when you're a 30-year-old person. But when you're a kid, that absolutely looked like something, and it didn't look like a garbage bag at all.
There was only 3 stories.
Right.
One you had a wooden Indian, which I didn't think looked bad. It's a wooden Indian. It looked like a wooden Indian.
Mm-hmm.
You have the raft, which is just goo. Mark's gonna see this and be like, "What the hell is this guy doing?"
Yeah, and George Kennedy was in that one. George Kennedy was in that one, who is Leslie Nielsen's, co-star in the Naked Gun films.
And then you got the hitchhiker, which was basically a grown-up Georgie in his yellow, rain suit.
Yeah. And Stephen King was in that episode, right? That Stephen King was in that episode. He was a truck driver.
So what special effects did you not like? There was no special effects. It was very limited practical.
He didn't like the 3D with the snake and the.
Oh yeah. I don't know. It was just. I mean, I thought it was going to be as good as the first one, or even close, and it was. It was just. What'd you say? They had a budget of $3.5 million.
Yeah, which $3.5 million.
$340,000, $3,400,000 in their pocket.
Dear Lord. Okay, so outside of Ackerman, who thinks this is one of the worst movies in the history it's ever been made, what do you guys, pretty solid horror flick, not an essential, but definitely if you're a horror fan to watch.
If you're a Creepshow fan, you should watch Creepshow too.
Creepshow fan?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Screenplay was by Romero, so you have that thread. Stories by Stephen King, and the director, a guy by the name of Michael Gornick, was the cinematographer on the first Creepshow. So,
I met him. He's a very nice guy.
As far as the continuity from the first one to the second one, it felt like a Creepshow movie. It really didn't feel like that big of a departure from the first one. It was a little more slick. It was a little bit more, I hate when they say like MTV generation, but it was a little bit more colorful and it was a little bit more horror, whereas the other one I think was more story driven, and this was more let's just get to the punchline driven, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
also, I wanted to say this: a buddy of mine, Lee Carr, who's a writer, is in the middle of writing a book now all about Creepshow 2. He's done his first book was about Day of the Dead, and it's a book that it's out of publishing now. You can't get anywhere, and it was a very good book. So I'm constantly in contact with him, talking to him about it. I got to give you the link for that
so are you announcing here on Death Locker Podcast, Frank the Tank's going to be doing a one-on-one interview with this guy when the book's done?
Oh, absolutely.
You heard it here, folk.
I met him at. I went to a Creepshow too.
One person.
One person.
Uno.
I went to a Creepshow 2 reunion to meet a bunch of the actors and people from the film, and I met Michael Gornick. I met Rick Catazone, who did all the artwork. Him and Phil Wilson did all the artwork for the in between scenes, and I met a bunch of the actors. And he was actually just sitting there at one of the tables, and was just talking to me about Creepshow 2. He told me he was writing a book. We became friends on Facebook, and now we talk every once in a while where I'm checking in with him. And he's getting a lot of work done now with this quarantine that he's home. He said the book is just going through its final stages of a couple more interviews, and he's good to go. But yeah, I'll get you the link for that, and if anyone wants to pre-order that book.
Yeah, definitely. Deathlocker will definitely pimp the book to our one listener, Bob. Hey, Bob, out there. You own some cells from the animation, don't you, Frank?
Yeah. So I had purchased. I purchased an actual pencil drawing of one of the, before it was made into a cell, from eBay. Then when I met Rick Catazone, I was going to have him sign that. He actually had the original cell that matched my drawing. So I purchased that from him, and then I purchased a couple other ones from him because he has all his original cells, and he was selling some of them. Very nice guy. He's doing some of the artwork on the Creepshow television show now. Yeah, but they're really cool. The cells are, if you're into animation cells, they're really nice looking. And they're all one of a kind things that were used to create those scenes, all photographed separately to make the cartoon and the movement.
Very cool. Speaking of one of a kind, we got to get Ackerman back in here. He's been hiding in the back. Earlier, you hear him talking about how much he loved Creepshow 3, how much he was ready to talk about Creepshow 3. He's scooting up. He's excited. Look at him. You can see the anxiety on his face because
I can't wait to hear. He loves this movie, right? He's going to tell us he loves it.
For those of you who aren't seeing this on the video, he's actually pushed Mark Bone out of screen so that way we can focus on him. Steve Ackerman, Creepshow 3. Tell us your story.
Okay, here's the thing. I actually like the movie, but I don't believe it should have been called The Creepshow. To me, it was like a B-rate HBO special, Twilight Zone. It started off with an episode called The Remote, which was just like a remote control to a TV back in the day when they first finally started coming out with the things, and this chick had all these issues and problems. Every time she would hit the remote, her family would change from white to black to Mexican to Puerto Rican, back and forth, and for some odd reason, she started to rot.
I think the name of the story is actually called Alice, but yes, it's the one with the remote
and
control.
It's the father who pushes the remote, but okay.
Yeah, and she started to rot and stuff, and that was kind of cool. And then at the end, they turned her into a rabbit.
So did started to rot and shit.
Why she rotted?
So it's supposed to be somehow a play on Alice in Wonderland. Victor the Vampire makes an appearance. The way I'm gonna let you finish, but just to kind of think, what I think that they tried to do with a lot of these is to try to like teach you a lesson. The teenager was she was stuck up. She was kind of a bitch.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the remote thing came into play with that, but ultimately she started to look on the outside the way she was on the inside. I don't know why the whole rabbit thing, because a lot of that movie made no sense, but I think they were trying to tell you a story. I think that section should be cut out and should be played for kids everywhere in preschool. If you don't act right and you're an ugly person on the inside, you get turned into a big pus monster and then a little fuzzy bunny.
Yeah. Now the second one, what was the second one? Was about a radio.
The radio, yeah. The guy buys the radio from like the homeless person, right?
And like it's telling them all like
it's giving him financial advice.
Yeah, I gave him financial advice and stuff, and he found some money and a hooker and a pimp, and it was the pimp's radio, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. So he bought the radio from the homeless dude, and the radio was giving him all kinds of advice. The radio was telling him what to do, watch out for this, watch out for that.
Right.
You could maybe argue that the radio was supposed to be symbolic of the voice, your conscience in your head telling you what to do. And then the radio he turned on the radio in that he destroyed the radio, didn't listen to what the radio was telling him. The hooker killed him, and then it turns out that the pimp also had a radio.
Right.
A second radio, not the same radio.
Oh, I thought it was the same one.
The same one that he destroyed?
See, I told you that movie's cheaper. No, you're all right. Wait, yeah, you're right. You know this? I only watched it real quick because I was like, oh my god, I can't deal with this.
Again, to our listener, 2 weeks to prep for this.
Good.
And this movie's like, let's see, how long is this movie? Oh dear Lord, 110 minutes long.
The third one was good, where they thought the mail order bride was a robot.
No, that's not the third one.
Oh,
The third one is the call girl.
Oh, yeah. It goes around killing people, but she ended up going to that monster dude, and he ended up trying to kill her. Yeah, that was good.
Jeff Lockard podcast, where you come for the deep insight.
Well, I like the one.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, I watched it. The kicker and the thing. I'm not going to tell you anything else about the movie,
there
but
were
just
some cool twists to it. But it was just
okay. I thought that story was interesting, but the makeup of if you want to talk about cheap special effects, that vampire monster-y thing, whatever it was.
Yeah,
that was pretty suspect.
It's always a bad sign when you have cheap effects and substandard acting.
Yeah, that was pretty rough.
Those two things together there's just some really over the top, and really it just didn't. And most of the stories, the acting was not that it was bad. It was like overacting almost. And it was, I don't know if it was meant to be funny or cheesy. Obviously, this is the first Creepshow that Stephen King and George Romero are not attached to at all. Yeah. And they were just trying to work with the name of Creepshow and getting people to buy, which they did, because that's the reason I went and bought it. It went direct to DVD.
Did it even make DVD?
Yeah, it went direct to DVD, and actually the DVD went out of print right away because they didn't sell anyone, and now it's actually pretty hard to find the movie.
Okay, so we got to the Professor's Wife, which the car girl, Professor's Wife.
Which was the best one, I think, of all of them.
Yeah, when they say they thought she was a robot and they chopped her up, and about 15 minutes after doing it, they realized it wasn't a robot, and they had to try to hide her in the house and stuck her in the fridge, and she ended up getting taped back together though at the end, didn't she?
Yes, the magic duct tape.
Yeah.
They don't want her to leak, so what they used was that tape that you see on the infomercials that you can put on like your boats or
on the screen door. Yeah.
Screen door or your gutter. Yeah.
Magic Flex Seal.
Flex Seal.
Funny, but it was actually pretty good. I like that one a lot.
So you like the wife getting chopped up in little pieces one?
Yeah, because it took. I mean, once she started bleeding, I guess she could have realized she wasn't a robot. But I guess then they they put her in the refrigerator under the bed, chopped her up.
I don't remember. Did they find out? I mean, the whole movie when they're talking to him, everyone was always mentioning, "How did you have time to find a wife?" Or "How did you do this?" We always know you were working on your special project, and he said, "It's almost done. It's almost done." Did they ever mention? I don't remember. Did they mention what the special project was that this professor was working on?
No,
because
no.
They assumed it was the girl, and it wasn't. And now you never found out what it was.
No,
you kind of did,
unless it was the wedding.
No, the professor was the one who created the remote control and left.
Right. So all the characters and all the stories intertwined throughout the stories. Right.
Watched it twice.
He's the one who picks up the rabbit, and in the beginning, so he has the rabbit, and the girl's eating the cake in his house. She walks in and she sees the wedding cake there, and she's eating it before she gets turned in. So they all link together, but I don't remember what his project was.
I kind of always thought he didn't have one big project. He had a bunch of small projects, like the stupid remote, and he did the 2 radios. Although there was that one weird scene, and I think it in the Professor's Wife where the dean came knocking on the door, and she's like, "You've been working on this for 15 years. You got to get this done, or we're gonna cut your funding."
And he kept saying, "Soon you'll find out. Soon you find out." So he led the audience to believe that this girl really was his project, because soon you'll find out when you meet her. But it wasn't. So I only seen the movie twice. Once when it first came out, and once.
I'm wondering if the soon you'll find out was the remote control, and he intentionally sent the remote control to the daughter.
Yeah, there was a lot of little twists in that, but
it was very Christopher Nolan. with the twist and the turns, and you know,
Yeah, like I said,
you were really on the edge of your seat that whole movie because all the characters, they interplayed together. You know, it's like watching a Quentin Tarantino movie. A lot of different flashbacks and people doing things and other characters, and then it spins off to a different direction. I mean, I was amazed. And you look confused.
There's the last story, which is I can't remember anything about it for the life of me.
The haunted dog.
It was the doctor that got in trouble, and they put him in that meth house to work on the patients. He gave the guy the hot dog.
The free clinic.
Yeah.
Oh, he was like a real jerk in the beginning. He was like nasty to people in the street. And then he worked there and he's just writing out prescriptions and giving people like really bad advice, being racist and stuff like that.
Yeah. The thing is, like, he gave that hot dog to the homeless guy and he choked on it.
Yeah.
He died. Okay. But now this is what I didn't get. Did that really happen, or was he just so whacked out on drugs and he was just thinking about?
No, it really happened. And then the guy's ghost followed him around.
Oh. It was hard because, I mean, it could have really have happened, or it could have been him.
But
messed up on the pills.
You know, what threw me off on that one was he's being so freaked out about a ghost following him, but he was partying with vampires.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
That didn't make any sense.
No.
Mark Bone, man, we haven't heard from you. I know you've been hiding. I know you've been trying to contemplate your thoughts, trying to figure out how to articulate your love, your admiration, your overall reverence for this film.
I've never seen it.
Again, Deathlocker podcast given 2 weeks of prep, and dude doesn't even watch the movie one. Not even a trailer, nothing, huh?
No, I have no idea about Creepshow 3.
Wow. I'm going to throw you guys off a little bit. I actually really liked Creepshow 3.
You liked it?
I did. But I'm going to give you the perspective of it. It's on that so bad it's good spectrum to me. I mean, it's something that's, you know, Birdemic, Troll 2, you know, kind of, it makes no sense. It's the special effects are really bad, but they reminded me, you remember the old Monsters TV show?
Yes, I love that show.
The special effects and some of the acting was so over the top, it just really reminded me of Monsters.
Yeah.
It was absurd. The story, like, you know, when the professor's wife, and they're just like, this is great. Oh, look, wow, these circuit boards must be really small.
Yeah.
You know, it just went so far off onto the absurd. Like, seriously, man, dude, you need to watch it.
It wasn't a horrible movie by any means.
No.
And the fact that it falls under the Creepshow umbrella makes it like, all right, I'll sit and watch it. And it's entertaining. It's not Emmy, it's not Oscar award winning here.
No, it's a dumb, stupid, fun movie that you just kind of watch with some other horror fans, and you're just like, this is so stupid, but it's fun. You know what I mean?
How do you watch it? Like if it's out of print and I can't find it, where do I watch it? Like YouTube?
I've got a copy of it if you want to watch it. Just hit me up offline and I'll get you a copy.
Oh, that's illegal. FBI.
But no, it's fun. The first time I watched it, I saw it and I was expecting Creepshow 3. So I hated it. I did not like it. I thought it was a stupid movie. It took me I think I had to go through it several times to get through it. But my focus in my mind and the goggles I had on was I wanted a Creepshow 3 movie. I wanted decent writing. I wanted a good story. I wanted some gore. I wanted something better. But when I rewatched it for this podcast, I was like, this is like a fun movie. My wife was sitting there watching it and she's like, it's not that bad. A lot of effort was put into trying to have some sort of continuity. I mean, a lot of effort was put into trying to have some sort of continuity.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up?
I'm just trying to figure out what freaking Cracker laughing about.
Oh, nothing.
But a lot of effort was put into trying to have some sort of continuity in it. It was stupid. It was asinine. It makes no sense, but it's fun, man. You watch it and you're like, hey, that's the character from the first part. That's the character from the second part.
Yep.
The only thing I thought was a complete waste of time was the hot dog vendor was the creeper. And then they had the world's worst special effects because it looked like someone used a Photoshop filter for his face to melt like a candle wax, and it was dumb. So looking at Mark Bone's face, he's just not into this at all.
No, I'm into it. It's just
he's not going to go out and get some Creepshow 3 and just
I'm going to watch Creepshow 3, but it's hard to keep a straight face when the guy next to you is like shitting his pants every 5 seconds. And even I'm 43 years old and farts are funny still, Simon.
Farts are funny.
I can't. Couch looks like when I get up.
I know we're not going to talk about it, but has everyone here watched the television show? I mean, have you all seen it?
Fun.
I'm waiting on it to come out on a different platform because I don't have the
Shudder. It's now it's actually on. I want to say AMC, and they've been playing they're replaying season 1 from Shudder now on AMC. I think it's every Monday or something like that. So you can check on demand. You can probably go and find them now.
Oh, sweet.
And fun fact, James Doodleson, who was one of the directors for Creepshow 3, he is a producer on the TV show.
Oh.
Yeah, that's interesting. So while you guys are over there, and by you guys, I mean the dude who's over there shitting himself, crapping on Creepshow 3, this guy's helping produce what's a pretty solid Creepshow television series.
Yeah.
So that kind of wraps it up. Short, sweet, kind of sort of interesting, but not really. I guess we'll find out if anyone listens to it. You guys got any saved rounds, alibis?
You had 2 viewers last week. I was one of
them. His grandma was the other. But what do you guys want to do next? You want to do a single movie? You want to do an anthology? You want to watch a cartoon?
I would be curious to do a film that I haven't seen yet.
Mark Bone, sir. What do you want to do?
Well, obviously, there's lots of movies I haven't seen. This is the second straight podcast where there's been movies that we're supposed to talk about that I haven't watched.
Yeah, so I mean, Creepshow is a very obscure franchise. I apologize for that. Friday the 13th, I know it's kind of small. It's very, there's not a lot out there. Friday the 13th, his name is Jason, but I'm sorry that we picked these obscure movies for you to watch.
Well, Shane is the king of the obscure. He talks about movies all the time that I haven't seen, and some of them are actually pretty decent horror movies that I never got around to watching. And it's usually, I find when a film too many years after its release, you can't watch it anymore. It's kind of lost its whatever that is So I only go back when he recommends something, and then I'll check it out once in a while.
I don't know what Steve's doing there. So Mark, it's all you, man. You pick the poison for next week. If it's obscure, we will actually watch it. Frank and I will actually commit to watch the thing that we're going to talk about.
I've seen the first 2 over and over and over again.
Yeah, there was 3 of them.
Okay, I'll pick it, but I don't know what it is right now, so don't put me on the spot.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. You heard Mark Bone does not like to be on the spot. It'll be a surprise. Next week, we will watch something, and hopefully he lets us know before we record on Saturday night. So, if nothing else, that is it. Make sure you like and subscribe. We actually do have a pretty, I'm going to say decent in that almost to triple digits on the iTunes. As far as the Facebook goes, I don't never update the account. So if you go there's nothing there. Maybe we'll get one of these guys to put something on their little profile, Mark Bone in a Speedo or something. The YouTube page, we're trying to get up some content. We're going to be doing a reaction video next week, so make sure you watch those because they are equally as stupid, because we believe at Deathlocker the best way to watch reaction videos is to not show you a reaction and to wear a mask, because that makes a ton of fucking sense. I'm Hobo Socks. This is Death Locker. And we'll catch you next time.